Are the Phoenix Suns like the American shopping mall, completely unsavable?
Get that stuff out of here! It's Southwest Bias!
Okay, I'm not going to talk about shopping malls, but I was building some Lego roses for my wife the other night. And yes, I failed to get the Valentine's Day gift done on time, but at least I bought it, right? But I found these things immensely difficult to put together. And my saving grace was that I had the instructions and the steps to go from point A to point Z and get these things done. Could I have started in the middle and figured it out and got something that looked like a rose? Probably, but I can't do it all and make it right and get to my end goal without starting at step one and having a vision, thanks to Lego, on how to get it finished. That's the problem with the Phoenix Suns right now. You can blame the front office, you can blame the coaching staff, you can blame ownership, and you can blame the players. And you'd be right in any of those because nobody's coming out unscathed from a season like this with the Phoenix Suns. It's been disappointing from every level, and there's no doubt about that. But before you fire the coach, before you run the owner out of town, and before you start trading star players, maybe it's time to take a long, hard look at the front office that's made the decisions and find somebody point blank that has a vision for the present and a vision for the future and how to win in both, and follow that plan and get them installed at the beginning of the offseason before you make any decision. So that individual can evaluate the entire organization from top to bottom and decide what needs to change to make that vision happen. Brian Windhorst had this to say on ESPN about the Suns not too long ago.
This is what people in the league say about the Suns. They are excellent at talent acquisition. They are not good at team building. And that's what's happened here.
Sure, they have been excellent at talent acquisition. Look at the roster. If you were playing fantasy basketball, you'd probably win your league with this group. If you're putting together a team based purely on stats and not on what happens in a locker room or what happens chemistry-wise on a court, you'd have a winning mix here. But the problem is, when you look at it overall, you do not have that winning mix right now because of some of the things that have happened. And it starts with James Jones. You can blame Mat Ishbia if you'd like. He's not without fault, and he certainly has been part of what has led them down the path that they're at. But it's not just him. Some of these issues have been here much longer than just since Mat Ishbia showed up. Not valuing the draft, issues inside the locker room between coaches and players, missed trade opportunities. These have been hallmarks of the Phoenix Suns for a very long time. Don't take my word for it. Go back and look at an ESPN article from a handful of years ago before Mat Ishbia was part of the organization and read what James Jones actually thinks about the draft. James Jones views the draft the way I view salads. Stay away from them at all costs because the value of eating it or the value of drafting it isn't worth the time spent on it. According to this article, the Phoenix Suns had 14 people in basketball operations. That's it. James Jones liked to run it that way, even though when you looked at OKC, one of the teams that everybody holds up as the bastion of what a front office should be, they have 14 people in their scouting department alone, not just in their basketball operations. James Jones even told a scout at the time, I don't want to read the 200 reports that you wrote. I'm not going to. Like, they did not value scouting. They wanted guys to stay around the team rather than go evaluate draft talent because they did not feel the importance of said draft talent. They even admitted, and that was James Jones specifically, that if he had been in charge, they likely wouldn't have taken Devin Booker. They probably wouldn't have taken Giannis Antetokounmpo, and he said they wouldn't in the future either because they want to win now, not win in the future, that they don't want to foster these young guys, they want to find proven talent. Sound familiar? That was before Mat Ishbia ever stepped to a mic or ever wrote a check to the NBA. That's James Jones's philosophy. You want to talk about trades? Everybody loves to complain about the DeAndre Ayton trade. But you got to remember that James Jones reportedly turned down offers for DA, for Domantas Sabonis before he got traded to the Kings, and for Miles Turner. Even when his own coach, Monty Williams, was asking for him to trade for Miles Turner. James Jones decided to give DeAndre Ayton the max contract by matching the Pacers' offer, even after the disgraced former owner wasn't really willing to pay DeAndre Ayton and started drama there. Coaching problems and communication with players? Have we forgotten about Monty Williams and DeAndre Ayton not speaking for a while? These things have all been around the Phoenix Suns and aren't new. I'm not saying that James Jones isn't good at portions of his job. In fact, I'd consider moving him into a player liaison role with the team if it's something he's interested in, because he knows how to identify talent in terms of guys that are out there on the market. He's, from everything we've heard, pretty good dealing directly with players. But team building does not seem to be his strong suit. I want somebody in here that has that blueprint, a plan that's going to build this team rather than one that's kind of on the fly and trying to figure out how do you just accumulate the most talent possible. I want somebody that can evaluate every level of this franchise and build a true culture. I love what James Jones accomplished in his career. The fact that he got the nickname champ is fantastic, but he's no Pat Riley. There's not Heat culture here. Some would argue there's not culture here at all right now. And you need somebody to come in with a vision to build that. It's time to build something and not skip steps. You got to hope the final product looks like what's on the box and not something close enough to it, because close enough isn't going to get you a win and isn't going to get you a Larry O'Brien trophy. But maybe that's just my Southwest bias. On the other side of the break, I'm going to bring in somebody that knows the NBA well and isn't going to blow smoke to Suns fans. It's Adam Mares of the All-NBA Show and, yeah, of the DNVR Nuggets Show. Time to tell you about Phoenix Raceway. I wasn't a big NASCAR fan. I'm going to admit that. No shame in me admitting that until last year I went out to Phoenix Raceway and experienced it firsthand. Not only is the venue unbelievable, it's in the Estrella Mountains, and I did not know it was out there until I went out last year, and I was blown away by how picturesque it is to go out there and watch a NASCAR event. And then I was even more floored by the event itself, and getting to ride in a pace car on the track was insane. And if you want to experience the Phoenix Raceway, go out there for the Shriners Children 500 at Phoenix Raceway, March 7th through the 9th. It is going to be a good time as 40 drivers compete against the likes of Chase Elliott, Denny Hamlin, Bubba Wallace, and the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series champion Joey Logano. It's the best-in-class fan experience for the whole family. Get your tickets now at PhoenixRaceway.com. You've seen those white cars out there, the Jaguars, driving around with the cameras on the side, and you've probably wondered, okay, I've heard about Waymo, but what is it really about? If you have not ridden in a Waymo, I highly, highly recommend it. It is a completely autonomous vehicle that is one of the safest experiences I've had. And I love Waymo, right? I don't get to drive in a Jaguar very often, but when I do, it's because of Waymo. You get in, it's you. It's not a ride share. You don't have to share it with some rando you don't know. You get to get in there. You get to put on your music. You get to enjoy a ride and take care of whatever you need to. You want to read a book? You want to just sit there in silence? You can, because Waymo takes you from point A to point B, and it's safe and affordable. Over 150,000 trips per week across San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Phoenix is what they do. Waymo's the first company to serve a fully autonomous ride with no human behind the wheel, and they've been doing it since 2015. Waymo has over 40 million miles of real-world driving experience, which could take you from here to the moon if you had a freeway between here and the moon. So download the Waymo One app today and ride today. You won't regret it. So before the break, I promised you that I'd bring in an unbiased person to talk about the Phoenix Suns. Well, slightly biased, but not on our side of the fence. It's Adam Mares, the host of the All NBA podcast and the DNVR Nuggets podcast as well. How are you, man?
I'm doing good. You know, I am two people. I am my biased Nugget self, and then I'm my unbiased All NBA self. I try to like tap into which one ever I need. So which one do you want today? I can bring either one to you.
I'd appreciate if you vacillate back and forth. I think that's the way that this will go best. Look, I'm just going to lay it out there. This is no secret. This has been a terrible Sun season. It's been a terrible 2 Sun seasons if we really want to get down to it. And it pains me to admit that to you because, well, we know about the Suns-Nuggets rivalry that once was. But what I want to know, I need your perspective on this. What do you do if you're the Phoenix Suns? If you are handed the keys to the kingdom, what are you doing here?
Well, I mean, again, this feels sort of like generic, almost like a platitude. But when Ishbia came in, he did what many owners have done before him, which was saw an opportunity to really make a splash and to go all in. And I think one of the lessons a lot of these new owners learn when they go through this process is that there's a piece to this that underlies everything else, in my opinion, and that is culture, company culture, and its organizational culture. And the players he brought in were great. But when you brought in Bradley Beal, especially as that third piece, you say, okay, naturally, it's tough for 3 guys who play best with the ball in their hands to work it out. So then you almost rely on the chemistry, the culture, the direction, this like unified vision. And they clearly didn't have that. And those players don't naturally fall into that, oh, they'll just figure it out on the court category. So for me, I do look at that team and I don't have hope that this is a move the pieces around and add role players around it. I think it's expired. We've seen things expire with Kevin Durant before. So for me, I would start to look to recoup assets and try to start over, not just say, hey, let's trade KD and get somebody else in that spot. I think you would try to have a long-term plan, but you want to bring in people who can establish an identity and a culture. Who are the Phoenix Suns? What is it we are trying to accomplish? What are our core values? And let's build a team around those values. And unfortunately, that's a long-term plan, but I think long-term planning is probably the stage they have to enter.
Well, for me, and I brought this up earlier in the show, I think that starts with hiring a head of basketball operations that comes in with that kind of plan and has that vision because, well, James Jones helped get them to the finals. He's been here since 2017 in one capacity or another. And I feel like at some point there's an expiration date on that. And really, there's no culture at this point, just like when he had arrived. And one could argue that CP3 brought a lot of the culture in that finals run. So to me, I feel like that's the logical starting point before you do anything else.
Well, I think you want somebody that's, if you're going to make a long-term plan, you want to bring in somebody that can execute a long-term plan. So if it is going to be James Jones, then okay, he's been there, but now you're saying we're shifting gears. These are the things that are important to us. But I'm with you that I think more often than not, when you're coming out of an era that was a peak and then is on the downside, I think you come into the next era and you think, all right, fresh eyes. Let's have a fresh vision, a fresh perspective on this team. And also, when a guy is a guy that brought in a lot of the pieces here, sometimes it could cloud their vision for getting rid of those pieces. One of the things that the Suns did that I think was unfairly criticized was they used up all their assets to acquire these big players. But the truth is, Kevin Durant would fetch you assets. Devin Booker, as painful as that might be, would fetch you a lot of assets. There's a way to tear this team down early, not too late. You could argue it's already maybe a little late, but I don't think it's too late, that you could break it down in a way where it's like, okay, we are able to reset in a way that shouldn't cost us 10 years or 7 years or 5 years. This can be a quick shift to where it's a new era, and let's identify our piece or pieces and go from there. So, but I agree with you that I think it makes the most sense usually when you have someone new at the helm, whether that's a new coach, a new front office, or both. In this instance, I think it's probably more a front office.
Well, when you look at the players that you could potentially move. You obviously brought up Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. Bradley Beal's difficult because of the no trade clause. Do you lean to starting with moving on from a Kevin Durant before you look at a Devin Booker and try to figure out what assets can I get back? Because there's a raging debate here in Phoenix about whether or not you actually move on from Devin Booker. And some believe you shouldn't move on from either of them. But where do you stand if you're looking at this going into the offseason?
To me, I think Kevin Durant, to me, is almost a for sure player I would move on from. I'm not sure that he's completely happy there. I know you can get mixed reports and hear different things from different people. You're more plugged into this than I am. But I also know the arc of Kevin Durant and what it's like when he's at a place for a certain amount of time. And I do think that moving him alone would get you some pieces. He's a phenomenal player still. He adds a lot of value to a lot of different teams. And so I think you can recoup back. Based on what you get in that market, that would answer the Devin Booker question, because Devin Booker's still young. He's been a great piece there. And we just saw this with the Luka trade, that it's not just about, does this move us closer or further from a championship? Sometimes you want to root for your guys. If I'm in Phoenix, I want to root for Devin Booker. I find him to be a pretty likable player. He's given the city a lot of things. He's really embraced the city. So I wouldn't move on for him just for no reason as we're hitting a reset. But if what you get back in the Devin Booker or in the Kevin Durant trade and your immediate flexibility after that tells you might be looking at a year or two long run, then I would look at that and say, maybe it's not best for us to hold on to Devin Booker for the next 2 years, not going anywhere, and then move on. So I can foresee a world where you keep him and you retool. I don't think you can retool for like next year, but you retool in a way that allows you the flexibility to pivot into a new era quickly. And if you can't do that, then I do think you have to bite the bullet and look and say, hey, Devin Booker can probably double our assets if we move on from him and set us in a nice, clean slate in a way that we think we can set ourselves up for success in the near future.
Now, outside of the Suns, and you can't answer, find a guy from Sombor in the second round that can be other generational. What is your view on how to build the right way in the NBA? Because that, again, is another debate here going on with Suns fans is, do you just blow it all up and try to go through the draft? Do you try to get young pieces in trades and try to supplement via free agency? Where do you stand on the right way to build an NBA team?
Well, I think the first thing is you have to have a cornerstone piece. And I think it's underappreciated how difficult this is. Like if you look at the Detroit Pistons, they're in year 4 of Cade Cunningham. They've had some injury luck and this or that, but year 4 is where it's starting to click. And you don't always know, like even as recently as a year ago, was it certain that Cade Cunningham could be the number 1 on a championship team? I think a lot of people could say he would be the 1A or 1B, but you need somebody equal to him. This year, all of a sudden, he looks like, no, that's a cornerstone piece. That's a building block. And then from there, you start to say what works with him. You've seen a bunch of different things. How do we build a roster around him? If you are going to hold on to Devin Booker, I think you probably have enough intel about what works around Devin Booker now to successfully build around him. Although I would say I'm being very defensive of Devin Booker here, which is kind of funny because I actually like him a lot. As much as we know what he is, I feel like the last year and a half, you expect this trajectory where you're growing into it. I feel like he's sacrificed a lot in a way where I'm almost questioning if I know how to build around him. Because the version of him from 2022, like that version to me is like, okay, that's your superstar guy. He's going to be your mainstay. And you have one perspective. The last 2 years almost clouds that a little bit. But if it's Devin Booker, then you just start bringing in pieces, whether it's through the draft, free agency, or just acquiring assets. But it's like, that's our cornerstone. And we're going to fit in around that player's strengths and weaknesses. If you do move on from Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, then you're hitting a full reset. To me, you almost have to do what the Utah Jazz are doing. And I know this sucks because the Utah Jazz are not a team people want to like be compared to, but it's, do we have the cornerstone guy? And if not, you can't move too early. It's like, we have to wait till we see that clarity and see that guy come in. One of the worst things a young team can do, in my opinion, is rally behind the wrong guy. Like, okay, all of our chips are in on Brandon Ingram. We're building around him. That's our guy. And we're going to sink or swim with that. And you get 5 years into it, and it's like, that was not the guy we should have invested our strategic interests in. That's the hard part about it. So right now, if it is Devin Booker, just think everything through him. How do we make Devin Booker the best version of himself and bring in a culture and establish a direction that we want? And if it's not him, you just want as many shots at it to find the guy that it will be and start going from there.
Yeah, you bring up the kind of Devin Booker kind of changing the way he plays over the last few years. And I found it interesting because the other day somebody asked him essentially, are you going to take over a game? When do you know to do that? And he said, I've kind of left that in my past. And I wonder if that's the right kind of maturation you want from a guy, or if he actually needs to tap back into that at some point and be that guy that would just literally take over a game.
I think he still can and should be that guy. I think it's really hard with Kevin Durant. This is the thing about giving. It's not that they're the same player, but they do operate in the same way. Like they're looking to score, right? They can shoot. They're looking to get into their shot. So he naturally had to take a step back because of that. But if you paired him, and again, I'm just going to throw out random names. Don't hold me to this. If you paired him with a Zion Williamson, right? If that was the guy that you said, that's our building blocks, he gets to go back into the thing you're talking about. He should be taking over games. Zion's great, but he has the ability to get to his spots out on the perimeter late in games. And so he should go back into that mode. If you give him another guy of that caliber, another Kevin Durant type player, he's going to have to sacrifice again, just naturally, because you have two guys. And by the way, the Lakers are running into this, or will run into this, in my opinion, in the future. It's cute that LeBron says, hey, sometimes it's going to be him, sometimes it's me. There's not many instances of that working successfully unless the two play off of each other in a direct way. Jokic and Murray, Kobe and Shaq, that type of dynamic. Luka and LeBron don't have that. Kevin Durant and Devin Booker don't have that. Him and a guy like a Zion or a Paolo or something like that probably would. And so to me, it makes a little bit more sense. I still think Devin Booker is good enough that if he were on my team, I would want to build a team around his strengths so that he is in that position, because I think that's where he's best.
All right, put your Nuggets hat on. Are you guys taking joy in my pain? I just need to know.
You know what? You're going to act. This is where answer is worse. And I feel it more for Philadelphia, right? Like you when you're in this era, you have certain teams you hate. Lakers, everybody hates the Lakers. Mm-hmm. Philadelphia, because the Embiid Jokic rivalry, and then Phoenix because they swept Denver back in 2022. So you have these little rivalries. Philadelphia, for sure, I don't take any joy in. It's actually too sad. I actually feel so bad that it's like you got in a fight and you hurt the other guy so bad, you actually feel bad about him. That's where I am with Philly. And weirdly, I kind of feel that way about Phoenix too. Less so, but there's a little bit of like, I just wanted to beat them in the playoffs again. I didn't want them to like completely dissolve and disintegrate and be where they are now. So I'm not as happy as you would think, Espo. That's what I would say.
I'm glad you're not. I'll have to ask your other co-hosts how they feel, but he is.
Don't ask D-Line.
He is Adam Mares. Check him out on the All NBA podcast with Tim Legler. They do a fantastic job there. And if you so choose, you can check him out on DNVR Nuggets as well. All right, before we wrap up this edition of Southwest Bias, news came down today that Diana Taurasi, after 20 seasons, is retiring from the WNBA. She's the GOAT. I don't care if you don't want to agree with me. That's your prerogative. But I think it's tough to not agree that she is the greatest of all time when it comes to Arizona athletes. I love Larry Fitzgerald. Steve Nash did unbelievable things. Charles Barkley in a short time here was great. Shane Doan has left an impression. And let's be frank, Pat Tillman is in a different category altogether. But when you look at what Diana Taurasi was able to do, 3 championships, 2 WNBA finals MVPs, being able to go out there and change the game of women's basketball and put it on the map in Phoenix, she has done more for her sport and for the Valley than any other athlete. So I want to tip my Brandon Bills cap to you, DT, and say congratulations on an unbelievable career and an even more unbelievable impact that you had on Arizona and all the young girls that watched you play the game growing up. That's it for this edition of Southwest Bias. You can follow me on Twitter at Espo. Thank you to my guest, Adam Mares, and we'll talk to you next time. Ahoy, hoy.